Two parallel runways sit less than 300 meters apart at Mexico City International Airport. That single fact, the distance between two strips of concrete, is the reason Mexico City has spent 30 years and roughly $20 billion trying to fix its airport, and failed. The international standard for two parallel runways to operate independently is 1,035 meters. Mexico City's are under 300. In practice, they function as a single runway. Every takeoff waits for every landing. Every landing waits for every takeoff. That's why an airport built for 32 million passengers is trying to handle 45 million. That's why the Mexican government canceled a $13 billion replacement airport, built a new one 35 kilometers outside the city, forced cargo out to a facility that couldn't handle it, and triggered U.S. sanctions that revoked 13 international routes. And in the summer of 2026, right in the middle of the FIFA World Cup, Mexico City International Airport actually lost passengers. It handled fewer people during the biggest sporting event in North America than it did the year before. This is the story of one of the most complicated, most political, and most expensive airport crises in the world, and how every government that's tried to solve it has made it worse. Let me give you the numbers that frame everything. In 2019, Mexico City International Airport moved 50.3 million passengers, its all-time peak. That was a facility designed for around 32 million. Then, the collapse started. 48.4 million in 2023, 45.3 million in 2024, 44.6 million in 2025. 2 consecutive years of decline in an aviation market that grew everywhere else on Earth. Meanwhile, Felipe Ángeles Airport, the alternative Mexico built 35 kilometers away in 2022, was supposed to handle 20 million passengers within 3 years. In 2025, it carried 7 million. Mexico built 2 airports, spent close to $8 billion combined, and now moves fewer total passengers than the old airport handled alone in 2019. The math isn't working, the politics isn't working, the physics isn't working, and the runway problem never went away. Here's why this matters more than a normal airport crisis. Mexico City is the 5th largest metropolitan area in the world, 22 million people. Mexico's economic capital, political capital, and main gateway to the United States. And its airport doesn't work. AICM is capped at 46 hourly operations right now. Before 2022, it ran 61. A single political decision cut its throughput by more than 30% overnight. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Transportation is enforcing sanctions. 13 routes were revoked in October 2025. The Delta Aeromexico joint venture was ordered dissolved. American, United, and Delta are all trapped in slot restrictions. And in the middle of all of this, Mexico hosted the World Cup opening match on June 11, 2026. The biggest opportunity to prove the airport worked, and the airport failed to grow. To understand why nothing works, start with the physical airport. AICM sits on 747 hectares in central Mexico City, 5 kilometers from downtown. It's completely surrounded by dense urban development on every side. There is no empty land next to it. There hasn't been for 40 years. Its 2 runways are each about 3,900 meters long, but their center lines are less than 300 meters apart. Here's what that means in practice. When a plane lands on the north runway, a plane on the south runway cannot take off at the same time. The 2 aircraft's paths are too close for safety separation. Add the altitude problem. Mexico City sits at 2,230 meters above sea level. Thin air reduces aircraft performance. Takeoff runs are longer. Payload capacity drops. Then add the land subsidence problem. The airport sits on a former lake bed. The ground is literally sinking. This is not a problem you can fix with construction. You cannot buy more land. You cannot move the runways apart. You cannot ignore the altitude or the sinking ground. This is why every government has tried to solve the problem by building a new airport somewhere else, and every attempt has failed. The most expensive attempt to solve Mexico's airport problem was killed by a single political vote, and its cancellation is what created the crisis we're watching today. In 2014, President Enrique Peña Nieto announced the biggest public works project in Mexico's modern history, a brand new airport at Texcoco, 20 kilometers east of Mexico City. Designed by Norman Foster, one of the most famous architects in the world, a 555,000 square meter terminal in the shape of an X, referencing Mexico, 3 initial runways scaling to 6, capacity to eventually handle over 100 million passengers, among the largest airports on the planet. Projected cost was $13 billion. By late 2018, 30% of the infrastructure was already built. About $3 billion was already spent. Then, Andrés Manuel López Obrador won the 2018 election, and within weeks of taking office, he killed it. He held a non-binding referendum in October 2018 where fewer than 1% of Mexican voters participated. Nearly 70% voted against continuing. Business groups called the vote unofficial, but López Obrador used it as political cover, and on December 27, 2018, construction was suspended. Mexico's federal auditor later estimated the total cost of cancellation between $9 and $16 billion. And here's the detail that hurts. Passengers flying through Mexico City International Airport today are still paying down the bonds that were issued to build the airport that was never finished. López Obrador's replacement was a very different project. Felipe Ángeles International Airport, AIFA. Built on the site of the Santa Lucia Air Force Base, 35 kilometers north of Mexico City. Constructed by the Mexican military, operated by the Defense Ministry. Built on a rushed timeline for about $4 billion. It opened on March 21, 2022. The projection was 20 million passengers within 3 years. The actual 2025 number was 7 million. The problems were structural. AIFA is too far from the city. The promised train link from downtown Buena Vista didn't open until April 26, 2026, 4 years after the airport opened. Airlines saw the economics as unprofitable. Only 3 foreign airlines operate international routes from AIFA: Copa, Arajet, and Conviasa. They serve exactly 4 destinations: Santo Domingo, Punta Cana, Bogota, Caracas. That's the entire international network of Mexico's second airport. To force AIFA to succeed, López Obrador issued a decree in February 2023 forcing all dedicated cargo out of AICM and into AIFA. That decision broke the cargo system. Because when Mexico forced cargo out of AICM, the United States pushed back hard. The 2015 U.S.-Mexico Air Transport Agreement is an open skies treaty. It guaranteed fair market access for airlines from both countries. The DOT determined that Mexico's restrictions violated the treaty. The response escalated over 3 years. On September 15, 2025, the DOT terminated the Delta Aeromexico joint venture, the immunity that allowed the 2 airlines to coordinate schedules and pool revenue ended, effective January 1, 2026. On October 28, 2025, Secretary Sean Duffy signed an order revoking 13 Mexican airline routes to the United States, 11 routes from AIFA, 2 from IICM. Aeromexico's planned Mexico City to San Juan was canceled. 9 Viva Aerobus routes from AIFA, Austin, JFK, O'Hare, DFW, Denver, Houston, LAX, Miami, Orlando, all revoked. Delta, which owns 20% of Aeromexico, called the termination disappointing. Delta and Aeromexico argued the dissolution would eliminate around $800 million in annual consumer benefits and force cancellation of up to 24 routes. Then, negotiations began. On November 25th, Mexico ceded 6 IICM slots back to U.S. carriers. On May 5, 2026, DOT and Mexico announced a preliminary framework, but Secretary Duffy said publicly, until then, our restriction on Mexican carriers will remain in place. The 11th Circuit heard oral arguments on June 23, 2026. There is still no final ruling. Then came the deadline that was supposed to force resolution, the FIFA World Cup 2026. The opening match was scheduled for June 11, 2026, at Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. Mexico expected 5.5 million international visitors and about 60 billion pesos in economic impact. The Sheinbaum administration announced a 10 billion peso renovation of Mexico City Airport, slot increases from 44 to 46 per hour. The new train to AIFA finally opened. Then the World Cup started. AICM handled 3.5 million passengers in June 2026, down 2.2% from June 2025, the only host city airport in Mexico that saw a decline. Independent studies estimated only 175,000 to 836,000 additional international visitors, under 20% of the 5.5 million forecast. Economic impact of roughly $2 to $2.7 billion, a fraction of what Mexico expected. The World Cup was supposed to prove the airport worked. Instead, it revealed that even at maximum political urgency, the fundamental problems could not be solved. Before I wrap, the honest version. This crisis is not physically unsolvable, it's politically unsolvable. IATA publicly said Mexico City needs a Terminal 3, runway and taxiway reform, and a coordinated 3-airport strategy. All of that is technically possible. What's missing is political will. AIFA could still work if the Buena Vista train reaches maturity. If international carriers open long-haul routes, AIFA has the physical capacity to relieve AICM eventually. The U.S. sanctions could be lifted if Mexico credibly restores U.S. carrier slots. The negotiations continue. But none of these are fixes on a Mexico City schedule. They're multi-year projects, and every government since 2018 has prioritized politics over infrastructure. Here's the way I keep thinking about this. Mexico City has spent 30 years, roughly $20 billion, and countless political battles trying to solve one problem: 2 runways that are physically too close together, and every attempt has made it worse. They built a $13 billion airport at Texcoco. They killed it before finishing. They built a $4 billion airport at Santa Lucia. It handles a third of what they projected. They forced cargo relocations. Cargo collapsed. They restricted U.S. carriers. The U.S. retaliated. They rushed a World Cup renovation, and the airport actually shrank. 2 airports handling 51 million passengers combined in 2025. 1 airport handled 50 million alone in 2019. The physical problem? Those 2 runways under 300 meters apart is still there. It cannot move, and until Mexico decides to build a genuine replacement airport or accept that AICM will forever be capped, the crisis will continue. This is a problem no Mexican government has solved in 30 years, and nothing in the current data suggests the next 5 years will be different.